In Northumberland, on the border with Scotland, lies England's largest forest, Kielder. A wild and remote landscape, home to dense woodland, ancient bogs, and breathtaking waterfalls. And yet, 100 years ago, it didn't even exist. Created to provide the country with timber, it has evolved to become a refuge for some of Britain's greatest and most secretive wildlife. Alongside the people who live and work here, much-loved plants and animals battle to survive and flourish. Filmed over one dramatic year, capturing the beauty of 4 spectacular seasons. This is the story of life inside the forest. In Kielder Forest, it's a time for survival. Harsh, brutal, and unforgiving, it's also beautiful. Hold on during these tough months. Hope is around the corner. This is winter. It's January in Northumberland. The new year is bitterly cold, but it brings one of the great joys of a British winter: snow. The UK sees an average of around 24 days of snowfall a year. Of course, many of us don't see any of it. For those that do, it's like a scene from a fairy tale. As the giant white blanket covers the landscape, what was already a challenging place to live has just become even harder. In winter, the red squirrel has a thicker, warmer coat than in summer. And at this time of year, its bushy tail is particularly useful as an umbrella. Right now, the red squirrel's impressive ear tufts are at their most pronounced. It's a feature the grey squirrels don't have, and these distinctive tufts, which keep their ears warm, can grow as long as 3 centimeters. But while these physical attributes can help keep them snug, they desperately need the warmth from the energy in the nuts stored weeks ago. Now winter is here, and they need to find their buried food. It's nice to imagine they simply have amazing memories. But when it comes to finding these nuts, their incredible sense of smell is vital. Scent glands in its cheeks help guide it to its winter stash. Their smell is so good, they know if a nut is rotten without opening it, and can find buried food under a foot of snow. But it's not just the red squirrels looking for food. Across the forest, as nourishment becomes harder to find, animals' survival skills are tested to the limit. Barn owls are usually nocturnal, but in winter, as cold nights force their prey to become more active in the daytime, the owls adapt and will also be seen more in the day. They are the quietest of flyers, with a light body and huge wings with specialized feathers. They are silent hunters. Elsewhere, for smaller birds, it's not just hunger they fear. There's also the threat of predators. It's why some birds have come up with a plan to join forces. Together, the largest member of the tit family, the great tit, and the smallest, the cold tit, help each other. While some search for food, others act as lookouts for danger. Foraging on the ground in winter is a key source of food, but also makes them more vulnerable. The great tits might want to keep an eye on their foraging partners. The cold tit is the only member of the family to store food for a rainy day, just like a squirrel. Also trying to find food in the frosty ground are Kielder's Exmoor ponies. The closest remaining relative to Europe's prehistoric wild horse, they might have outlived the saber-toothed tiger, but by the end of the Second World War, there were only around 50 of these animals left. They stood on the brink of extinction. Now, there are around 4,000, an improvement, but they're still almost as endangered as the giant panda or the wild tiger. In the summer, we saw how these Devon natives came to the northeast to help conservation. Their ability to graze on tough grasses other animals won't touch allows more delicate plants, like certain rare orchids, the space to grow. In the warmer weather, the ponies' coats were close, hard, and shiny. Now, to withstand the cold, harsh winter, they've grown a thick, protective two-layered coat. This, in effect, provides them with both thermal underwear and a raincoat. It's just one of the ways these animals have adapted to survive the wild moors of Exmoor, and now Kielder. Look closely at their faces and you'll see a unique feature. The prominent flesh around the eyes is known as a toad eye and helps deflect water and provide extra insulation. They also have larger nasal passages than other types of horse, so the cold winter air can heat up before it reaches their lungs. Protected from the weather, they can get on with their job of eating. They continue to graze away at even the toughest vegetation, even using their hooves to dig through the frost to get to the roots. The Exmoor pony may once have been on the brink of disappearing, but left to its own devices, this native British breed has everything it needs to survive the wilderness. In winter, here, for all living things, if you don't adapt, you might not survive. On this crisp morning in Kielder Forest, there's something beautiful but deadly in the air. Frost. These stunning ice needles are creating what's known as hoarfrost, a term derived from the Old English for an old man's beard. Unlike the deciduous trees which have shed their leaves, the conifers can survive the cold. They're covered in a protective coating known as cutin, a wax-like substance that traps fluids inside the needles. The fluids themselves then act like antifreeze. It's why in more extreme parts of the world, these needles have been known to survive temperatures as low as -40. Across the forest, there's an eerie silence in winter. Life has gone quiet. Animals have either moved to warmer parts or are conserving much-needed energy. A single sound seems to echo for miles. At this time of year, though, one thing remains as busy as ever, whatever the weather. The forest's monsters. The modern lumberjack is like a robot sent from the future. This harvester machine first cuts the tree down before feeding it through the harvester head to strip off the branches. It's ruthlessly efficient. 50-foot trees can become piles of neatly cut logs in seconds. It doesn't mean there isn't room for some old-fashioned chainsaws. In all, Kielder harvests 500,000 tons of timber every year, making it the country's most productive woodland. But what's next for all this wood? The timber must be processed and turned into building materials, furniture, or paper. There might well be a piece of Kielder in your home right now. But with 50 lorry loads of timber leaving the forest every day, those trees need replacing. Every year, 3 million new trees are planted in Kielder. For the foresters like Billy Joe, they're constantly planning and managing the future of this wilderness.
Part of the beauty of being a forester is that you get the opportunity to really shape a landscape on a huge scale. We're planting trees that I might not see being felled. It'll be for the next generation of foresters to come and manage.
But where do these trees come from?
The life cycle of a tree in Kielder Forest usually would start out by seed collection. So every year, members of forest research come out and they collect seed from the best trees that we have in Kielder Forest. Those cones are taken away, all the seed is extracted from them, they're then germinated and they grow in our forest nurseries.
200 miles away, in Cheshire, this is one of Forestry England's tree nurseries. Every year, it supplies the country with 12 million new trees. It might be miles away from Kielder, but it's here that the next generation of Kielder forest trees grow for their first 2 years. It's vital they're carefully monitored for damage and disease to ensure only the best trees make it. Eventually, it's time, and they're lifted. Each individual tree is inspected and packed, ready for its new home. In Kielder, it might look like the mail has arrived, but these are the forest's new trees. They're not quite ready for the ground yet.
We have a cold store where all of the trees are put in a refrigeration unit. Some of them are then treated against pests and diseases. We plant trees during the winter season when the trees are dormant, so they're not growing because it's cold, and it's the best time to take them from one location to another.
Soon, though, it will be time for these young trees to complete their journey and be planted into their new home. In Kielder, when a cold snap hits, the landscape is truly captivating. But it's also tough to survive, so it's easy to understand why some animals choose to sleep through winter.
Hello, what's your name then?
In autumn, bat ecologist David Dodds identified some of the forest's bat harems.
Yeah, I mean, what's not to like about that little face?
After mating, the females stored the sperm so they could wait until the spring to become pregnant.
Okay, let's pop her back in the bag and we'll put her back in a box.
Until then, bats survive the winter by hibernating.
There we go. 3 bats gone home.
Now it's the end of January. At an old, derelict farmhouse in the middle of the woods, David Dodds is back. For trained experts like him, it's the perfect place to carry out a hibernation survey, helping him to track the numbers of bats in Kielder.
Right, onwards.
Using a special camera that can follow David in the dark, it's vital the bats aren't disturbed.
It's critical that we don't wake the bats up, because if they have to come out of hibernation, they use up some of their vital fat reserves. So we keep the light to the minimum, we keep the noise to the minimum, we don't handle the bats as we might do in summer, and we're doing everything possible to avoid our breath or other forms of warmth reaching their bodies.
Even for the experts, they're not always easy to find.
Fabulous 1970s wallpaper, if you like that sort of thing.
There are at least some clues that they should be here.
These are bat droppings. I'd be fairly certain that's a long-eared bat because it's a slightly shiny texture to it, which is caused by the scales from moth wings, which are the main prey of long-eared bats.
In the UK, bats don't tend to hibernate in colonies.
There we go, we've got one.
so can be hidden away in hard-to-spot places.
He's underneath that bit of plasterboard there, tucked right in.
Some are easier to find.
That's a brown long-eared bat. You can tell quite easily because they have very large ears, but you can't see the ears at the moment. The bat's hanging upside down by its feet. Its ears, these giant ears, are actually folded underneath its wings. It's breathing perhaps no more than 3 or 4 times a minute. Its heartbeat is probably 20 times a minute compared to the 800 to 1,000 it would normally have. And these changes allow it to use up very low levels of energy and helps it survive right the way through the winter in a period when there's no food supply available. So that's why hibernation is so important and why it's so critical that we don't wake them up. Okay, I think we're done.
For a survey like this, they usually estimate they'll find 1 in 10 bats. So, with 2 discovered, it's actually likely there are around 20 bats tucked away in this building, sleeping quietly through the winter. It's now February, and the worst of the snow is melting away. The stillness of the forest is disturbed by the sound of Kielder Burn's rushing waters. If you listen carefully, you might also hear the song of one of Kielder's most remarkable birds. This is Britain's only aquatic songbird, the dipper. They can be seen in winter, fearlessly hopping from stone to stone in the onrushing stream. As early breeders, this is the time they start to mark out their territory before having their young. A diminutive, stocky bird, it takes its name from its distinctive bobbing movements. Experts have different theories about the dance of the dipper. It could be a way of sending a warning to rivals, a means of attracting a mate, or even a method of camouflaging itself against the background of the fast-moving water. Each dip is accompanied by a blinking flash of white. Its eyelids are covered in tiny down feathers, giving it transparent bird goggles. Perfect as it dips its head in the water, searching for prey. Once located, this bird is an extraordinary diver. It seems to fly underwater. But how can a songbird survive in such hostile waters? A dipper's feathers are extremely soft and dense. It has almost twice as many as a blackbird. When it's not looking for food, it will use its large preen gland at the base of its tail to oil itself. It must take great care of its own natural wetsuit. Having perfectly adapted to hunt in this environment, the river provides a rich buffet of aquatic insects and small fish. In the coming weeks, this is the place it will build a nest and raise the next generation of dippers. Tiny droplets of water hang in the air, leaving Kielder shrouded in mist. Adding to the mystery of the wintry forest is something often overlooked and sometimes found hanging spookily from trees. Despite their appearance, though, these aren't plants. They're lichens, a unique complex life form, part fungi, part algae. The algae part of a lichen uses light to make energy. The fungi part then uses that energy to grow. Lichens cover about 7% of the world's surface and can be found on every continent, including Antarctica. They can even live for centuries. In the UK, there are almost 2,000 species, some stringy, beard-like, others looking like roots or even tentacles. The good news for Kielder is that their presence here is a sign the air is clear and clean. Highly sensitive to sulfur dioxide, lichens were almost wiped out across England by the Industrial Revolution. Acting as nature's air pollution monitors, seeing them flourish here, Kielder can breathe easy. It's the end of February. One place the air is certainly fresh are the hills around Kea Forest. In winter, they're an exposed, brutal place. One animal remains. Whatever the weather, it wouldn't be the British countryside without sheep on the hillside. Here, the breed is mainly the border cheviot, a hardy sheep that can fend for itself. A strong maternal instinct makes them ideal for raising lambs in the hills. After the autumn tupping season, the ewes should be pregnant and must be scanned. First, with the help of sheepdog May, Farmer Bob must gather the sheep. For Farmer Bob, it's vital he finds out how many lambs to expect. His livelihood depends on it.
It's never easy. It's hard at any time of year. It's worse, especially with the weather. You know, if you've got a hard winter, and so it can be tough. Like.
If any are carrying more than one lamb, he'll bring them down from the uncovered hills, as they need more food and care. Sheepdog May has done her job. Now they'll test 800 sheep, with one going through the scanner about every 7 seconds.
You got the shin guards on, Kev? Yeah.
Being a professional scanner is all about speed and accuracy.
There's two of them. Anyway, there's two there.
These hill ewes will have fewer multiple births than sheep in a less harsh environment. Each ewe is marked according to how many lambs she is carrying. Right now, they're no bigger than plums. All done, the majority carrying one lamb can return to the hills. Soon, winter will be over, and it will be time to give birth. With snowfall making way for rain, the burn is flowing rapidly. But it's not bothering one pair of dippers who are preparing to build a nest. The dipper breeding season can begin as early as February. Most dippers are monogamous and can breed with the same partner year after year. For the next few weeks, they'll work together, collecting moss, roots, grass and leaves to create the ideal place to lay eggs. Fortunately, The riverbank is the perfect builder's yard. Often, when they've collected material, they'll soak it in the river to help them weave it into the nest. Sites are built close to the river and are often used in successive years. For this pair, they've chosen a spot under a bridge. After days of hard work, their extraordinary feat of engineering is finally revealed. Deep within this dome-shaped nest, the dipper will lay its eggs. Soon, these adults will have extra mouths to feed and a new generation to teach the skills needed to survive these waters. In parts of the forest, there are signs of new life. The starkness of winter is broken by the appearance of catkins on the alder tree. Long, slim clusters of tiny flowers that dangle the prospect of spring. The pollen-bearing catkin is the male flower, waiting to open and use the wind to disperse its pollen. Elsewhere, new life has already emerged. It's early March. There are now new members of the feral primitive goat herd that have roamed these parts for centuries. These females, which have horns just like the males, have their kids from around mid-February. Wild goats like these will leave a herd and give birth alone in a protected spot. For a few days, the kids will remain hidden, but it's not long before their first steps out in the open. Look closely, and you'll see this youngster still has part of its umbilical cord attached. It's exploring its new world, sniffing and nibbling anything in sight. Across the herd, there are several new kids, who, when they aren't finding a pleasant resting spot on a tree stump, will now spend their time within smaller groups, consisting of just females. But it's far from certain that all the kids will survive their first 6 months. The threat of exposure or getting stuck in the boggy ground remains. Even as spring approaches, with the forest set to burst into life, it remains a harsh, unforgiving environment. It's March in Kielder. There's no single moment when winter fully loosens its grip, but the days are getting longer and nature is reacting. The forest's badgers, who spent much of the winter in their sets, are now spending more time outside, confident there is food to forage. As the new days begin, one of the great signs that spring is almost here is the sound of birdsong. One of the most familiar is that of the chaffinch. Well known for having regional dialects, with its song changing from county to county. It seems spring here in Northumberland sounds different to spring in Cornwall. The common toads have been hibernating, but now begin their migration from the forest to the pond for mating season. It seems like for the last few months, wildlife here has barely been clinging on. But now it's not just about survival, it's about new life. These goat kids have already arrived, and they're having to learn quickly how to survive their environment. There may be no natural predators for the goats in these parts, but that doesn't mean there aren't dangers. The landscape can be unforgiving. Youngsters might get trapped in bogs or simply be too weak to survive. For one kid, the harsh conditions have proved too much. Fortunately, others are thriving, discovering the pleasures of a drink from a cool stream, or the even colder taste of snow, still making an appearance on the higher ground. At the burn, the waters are calmer. The dippers continue to hunt in their distinctive way. But now they have new mouths to feed. In their nest, there are 3 chicks. For the parents, it's a busy time. Back and forth to the nest they go, making sure there's enough food for everyone. All their hard work building this incredible nest has paid off. For the young goats, they're quickly learning that the herd is all about hierarchy. Even amongst female nanny goats, if you want to improve your ranking, you're going to have to fight for it. This ritualized combat is an everyday feature of life. A lot of it is play fighting, practice for the real thing. One combatant might raise up before a clash, but won't engage if its opponent isn't ready. After all, the aim isn't to cause damage, but to test strength. Just weeks old, already these kids are engaged in their own bit of argy-bargy. These youngsters look set to continue the long history of feral goats in this part of Northumberland. For every creature here, life always seems to be taken one season at a time. It's hard to look too far ahead when your biggest concern is where your next meal is coming from. But for those who work in the forest, how Kielder will look decades into the future is being carefully planned right now. New areas of woodland are being created. The latest is a site overlooking Kielder water, known as Rushy now. The size of 80 rugby pitches, it's been prepared for 200,000 trees to be planted. In contrast to the cutting down of trees using high-tech machinery, the planting is done the old-fashioned way, by hand.
These are healthy trees. They're in bundles of 20, still grown from our nursery down in Cheshire. I make a slot with our spade, drop our tree in, make sure its roots are nicely in there, close up around it because the last thing we want is an air pocket, avoiding any damage to the bark. Give it a quick tug to make sure it's in, it's straight, and it's upright. And it's on to the next one.
With the help of volunteers, the first Rushy Now trees are being planted, knowing it will take decades for them to reach their full size. But the rest of the forest is an example of what it can become. It's been an incredible year inside the forest. Seeing the lives of those who work here and how they interact with the nature around them.
The best part of being a forester in Kielder is being able to be outside, experiencing the beautiful landscape. You get to be part of shaping an environment on a huge scale.
The landscape's hugely diverse compared to what it would be like if it was not planted in 1926. The species list and the naturalness is completely off scale to what this area would have been like without that intervention.
Over the ever-changing months, we've seen the magic of our seasons. Their flow and rhythms dictating the life of the forest. It's these changes that define the nature of this extraordinary wilderness. The arrival of newborn lambs signifies we're back in spring. It's time to do it all again.